Craig Berry here with the Mortgage Reports podcast. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Mark Gordon. Mark is the Chief Revenue Officer for Princeton Mortgage. Now, actually, right before the show, he did tell me that there's some changes going on, so we'll confirm that is still indeed his title here in a minute. Mark's primary goal is helping people get where they want to go. He helps loan originators become the best version of themselves through coaching and guidance. And he gets into the trenches with team members, helps them identify roadblocks and bad habits that may be holding them back. And Mark has had a lot of success in the mortgage industry, starting out roughly 22 years ago as a loan originator and sales manager at Castle Point Mortgage. Mark was a branch manager and VP of Ops at First Metropolitan Mortgage. And then Mark went on to become the founder and CEO of Fortune Funding. And Fortune was responsible for nearly $1 billion in loans over 5 years. And after selling Fortune in 2016, Mark joined Princeton Mortgage, where he is currently. Mark Gordon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Craig. I appreciate it. And it's always fun to hear an intro and somebody summarizing your work experience that way. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, did I hit the mark on those things? And let's first of all start with, has your role changed at Princeton?
Yeah. So, I mean, for most of the time I've been at Princeton, the company's around for a long time, but we were really a start over when we got here. And I've noticed in my career, I have these like 5-year runs in me that we kind of do. And we've been on a huge adventure here with tremendous success, being an Inc. 5000 company and doing the different things we've done at Princeton. As the role of kind of Chief Revenue Officer, head of sales, really has led into more travel and recruiting travel. That's not something that I love, quite frankly. I don't love being on the road and being a road warrior. I moved to Charleston from New Jersey a little over 5 years ago, and I've just really fallen in love with the community here. And so while I'm still doing a bunch of capital market stuff for the company and a lot of the sales, training, coaching, and performance for all of our loan officers across the country, my role in the recruiting will be significantly reduced, and I'm going to be spending a lot more time focused here locally, doing some originations, working with my wife, who's a branch manager here, and then also I hope to be starting some real estate adjacent businesses like landscaping and hardscaping, different things I'm going to be doing in the community here over the next couple of years when I find the right partners.
Very cool. Very actively involved in the community. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Now, you say you like to help loan originators. Let's just jump into that aspect of it, because I really like that. I like talking about that because loan originators themselves are a different breed in general. And you like to, help them become the best versions of themselves and have a more meaningful and intentional life. And so tell me more about that. How do you do that?
Well, that's my passion is here. I will say this. I've done a lot of work on myself. I'm one of those people that sometimes I'm painfully self-aware in that the person I've wanted to be sometimes has not always been the person that I am. Or in other words, we are what we do and what we say and how we behave, not always what we think we are, right? And so I've been fascinated my whole life with helping other people go on that same journey. I was a psychology major in college. That's how we interact with the world and how we behave and what makes us who we are has always been something that's very interesting to me. And what I find with loan officers is that, and really people in all different sales roles and different things like that, is that everybody thinks their own situation is unique, their own problems are unique, or they're kind of the only one experiencing their thing or their set of obstacles. But most of the time it comes down to there's a finite number of things that really hold people back. And oftentimes what we do through coaching is first we really help people identify what stage they're at. We kind of have these 5 levels of loan officer that we talk about. Kind of, okay, here's the level that you're at right now. And it's tied to production, but it's not always 100% production based. And then, okay, what are the things that keep people from level 2 from going to level 3? And what we find is about half the people that we have these conversations with kind of figure out they're not willing to do, or they don't think they can do, they have a limited mindset, the things that it takes to get to level 3. And for the other half of people, they're like, I'm going to figure that out. And then for those people, we really spend a bunch of time helping them kind of figure out whatever's holding them back. And it's these same things at different levels, right? It's You get that level 2 loan officer that's kind of riding the roller coaster, right? It's, hey, I can go get business, but then I have to babysit my pipeline. Then the business goes down, right? And then those loans close, and I got to go out and get the business again. It's okay, how do we get off the roller coaster? What are the things that hold those people back? Well, it's time management, right? And so, okay, cool. How do we budget your day and your time so you're spending time on prospecting no matter what? Well, at level 3, it's, hey, I'm a control freak. I do everything myself. No one can do it as well as me. But now you're on vacation with your family and you're in Florida and they're on the beach and you're in the hotel room and your wife or your husband's mad at you because it all depends on you and you can't take a break and you're about to break from it, right? Well, now we have to figure out, okay, how do I go hire people? How do I go delegate responsibility? Am I willing to do that to get to the next step? And so really bringing self-awareness to loan officers in terms of where they are. And when it's good, it's you. It's bad, it's you. Right. And helping them realize, okay, cool, this is what it'll take to get to the next level. And then figuring out that willing, wanting gap of, are you willing to do the stuff it's going to take to get there?
That's awesome, man. And I like the different levels that you assign to it as well. Now, you've referenced transparency. And one of the things that I was reading about you, it was the term that I really like, radical transparency. You're all about it personally and professionally. Expand on that for me.
Yeah, and so the story I always tell that kind of, or like the anecdote I'll give that like kind of summarizes it for people is, hey, you're walking down the street with your wife. A beautiful woman walks by and you look at her and your wife goes, were you just looking at her? And I always say yes, right? Because I would rather the short-term dysfunction or discomfort of telling my wife I was looking at that woman over the long-term dysfunction of being somebody who lies to my wife. And that may seem like you're doing that for the other person, but really it's very selfish. I don't want to have to worry about what I'm going to say, who I'm going to say it to, and I want to be able to live my life in a creative space. Well, when we're hiding from stuff or pretending to be someone we're not, that sucks up our creativity and it sucks up a lot of our energy because we're always trying to be whoever that other person thinks that we should be. Now, the cost of that is then if you want to be radically transparent, you can only behave in a way you're willing to tell people about, right? And so that's very clarifying too, saying, okay, if I'm anything I'm doing in any part of my life, I want to be able to tell people about it and be proud of that behavior, right? And so that radical transparency really becomes sort of its own accountability, which is to say, okay, if I know I'm going to have to tell everybody around me the truth, and I'm going to live this life of radical truth selfishly because I want to be creative and I want to feel good, well, then I have to make sure that I'm living up to being the person that I want to be. And so those two things really become married. And again, how many executives are there in the mortgage industry right now that know something about their company that they're not willing to tell the people who work for them? That's very stressful, right? And you end up lying to people or keeping things from people. And then you're like, well, what can I say and who can I say it to? And then also, by the way, you create middle managers who hoard power and information because they think that's the thing that's going to help them keep their job. And so then that creates tension within the ranks. Whereas if it's at a company level, you're willing to share all of the information, good, bad, or otherwise, with almost everyone, right? Then you eliminate that tension and then everyone gets to be part of the solution, right? So if we hoard information at the top and only the C-level people have that information, well, now we're the only ones who can solve the problem. But if we have a problem, I'm willing to tell everybody about it. And there might be a little discomfort in that, but it eliminates all the dysfunction that comes from that secretive stuff. And it makes everybody potentially a part of the solution. And what we found is that if you treat people like adults, they behave like adults across the board. And so it's been transformational for me as a person, leaning into radical transparency, and also made Princeton Mortgage the kind of place that people love to work.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. And funny how that happens, though, isn't it? When you treat people like adults, the results that you get, it's amazing. And I like that analogy. So let's talk about Princeton Mortgage a little bit. Like, tell me about the Princeton Promise.
Yeah. So Rich, our CEO, he's a huge reader. And I wasn't when I got here, but now I've really caught up to him. I spent a lot of time reading books over the last 5 years. And one of our favorite authors is Jim Collins. He wrote like Good to Great and Built to Last in those books. And he talks about catalytic mechanisms in those books, meaning, you have this flywheel thing, which by creating accountability within your organization, it spits off a bunch of other positive things that come with it, right? And so what we wanted with the Princeton Promise was a way, okay, how do we get meaningful feedback from our customers? Not just when something goes wrong, but really make it easy for them to give it to us. How do we make sure that our team is not hiding problems from us, right? And so, in other words, normally in a mortgage company, the higher ups only find out if a problem is bad because it got so bad that it exploded.
Right.
We wanted to make it easy for problems to rise to the surface. We also wanted to be the kind of place where only A players wanted to work. And so if you create that transparency, what it does is if you're a B or a C player, it's very uncomfortable in a transparent environment. So we want A players who are saying, hey, I know if things are transparent, I'm going to rise to the top. People are going to think I'm doing a great job because I'm an A player. We want those B and C players to go out. So the Princeton Promise, long way of saying this is, we offer every client $1,000 at closing if they're unhappy for any reason. And when we first rolled it out, we had people quit over it. We had a processor in the meeting where we rolled it out, pack up, leave the meeting, pack up her stuff and leave the building. She said, you're going to get me in trouble. It's going to be a disaster. Everyone's going to take it. Why wouldn't they take this for $3,000? And initially our goal was to have less than 10% of our clients take us up on it. But even in the first month, it was only 6%. And then quickly went down to 3% and then 2%. And over the last 4 years, it's been about 1/2 of 1%, or about one of every 200, 250 of our clients are taking us up on that Princeton Promise. And it's been absolutely transformational for our business and our company. It's why we have the top customer service scores in the industry. If you look up NPS score in Princeton Mortgage, it's literally like us #1, Tesla #2. I mean, you can Google this, it's out there. Because having that accountability of that Princeton Promise, and those borrowers actually get 3 emails during the process. If you're unhappy for any reason, click this button, get $1,000. First of all, when we make a mistake, we get to fix it. And so even when someone's mad enough to hit that button, they get a phone call from somebody on our leadership team, usually within a minute or two. They're blown away. They can't even believe it, right? And we're like, hey, what happened? We're so sorry. Let's fix it. We fix that issue for them. About half the time, people tell us to keep the $1,000, right? They're so floored by the fact that we did what we said we were going to do and called right away and handled it that they don't even want the money anymore. And then what it really did is it made it so that, hey, if we have a bad actor, no matter how much due diligence you do, you hire a loan officer that quite frankly you shouldn't have on your team. And as a loan officer, if your company has a bad loan officer somewhere else, that hurts the reputation of all of us, right? So now all of a sudden this loan officer's been here for 2 months and suddenly we've gotten 2 Princeton Promises, both from clients that said the loan officer said one thing at the beginning of the process that turned out not to be true. Well, now that person's out of here in month 2. Instead of at some other company, it might take 2 years, damaged reputation, fraudulent loans. We want to bring all those problems to the surface. And so over and over again, by introducing that transparency and accountability, we've been able to deliver a differentiated result.
Nice. Very nice. And let's segue over, because I think it's relevant to that. You've mentioned something about how important the systems that you have in place for feedback and how vital that is. And is that like essentially what you're getting with the Princeton Promise as well? Because it gives you that additional feedback that you're just talking about. Instead of waiting 2 years to discover, you're finding out right away if there's, issues that need to be addressed within your team.
Yeah, I mean, it's so 100%, right? And what we find is, but loan officers always think like, I'm sure they're out there listening to this and they go, oh, it's the ops team that gets the Princeton Promises. It's almost never the ops team that gets your Princeton Promise. It's the loan officer and how they communicate what's expected during the process. And by the way, when something goes wrong, how they do or don't have those conversations with their clients, that ends up being the thing that we see most come to the surface. But there are times where there is a process issue or there is something that comes up where we go, oh, wow, that's a hole in our machine. And by getting that information up front, and by the way, every time we get a Princeton Promise, we share that information publicly. We do a deep dive, an after action review, an AAR of what happened to cause that Princeton Promise. And then we learn from it, we iterate, we make the changes in the company. So hopefully that doesn't happen again, right? And so each time you get another tidbit of information, it's gold, right? The value of somebody being willing to say, hey, there's a problem here. I need your help on it. And by the way, now I get to fix it. So they're not going online and complaining about us. They're happy. They had this problem. It got fixed right away. They got this $1,000 in their pocket. They feel good. And then we get to learn and figure out what's going on with our team or our process to make it better. It's the best $1,000 you could ever spend. And when I tell you that last year, I think we paid out like $12,000 or $13,000 for the whole year. And you think about all the things we got for that, which was, a better online reputation, better employees in every seat, attracting the loan officers that want accountability, making sure our team is doing the right thing, making sure our customers are happy. It becomes a no-brainer.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. So What I'm just going to throw this at you because one of the things I saw you talking about on YouTube was about mindset. So, what do you think is more vital, mindset or discipline?
Well, I think they're intertwined, but I'll also say this: I find that there are surprisingly many successful loan officers that no one would call disciplined, right? I don't think that would surprise. There are some people in business that I don't think people would generally say are disciplined. Now, I certainly personally like to strive for discipline, and I think that to become the person that I want to become, it's an essential part of my game. But I would say mindset's more important, and I don't know that you can have discipline without the right mindset. And I'll give you an example. The number one differentiator that I see between people I want to work with and people I don't want to work with is what we call a player's mindset versus a victim's mindset, right? When things happen, are you focused? Sometimes things are 99% out of our control, but almost always things are at least 1% in our control. And the people that I want to spend my life with are the ones who are focused on the 1% that they have control over. And more often than that, it's a lot more than 1%, right? Mm-hmm. And the people who are focused on the 99% they don't have control over. And where you find really toxic people, or people that I find to be toxic, is, hey, they were actually 90% of control of this thing, but they're obsessed with the 10% they weren't in control of. That's all they talk about. That's all they complain about, right? And, we measure everything here. We're a little crazy about it, right? And so I'll have a loan officer that's like, my processor stinks. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that. Let me take a look. And I look at that loan officer's loans with that processor, and then I look at two other loan officers that have that processor. And the other two loan officers get better customer service scores, have their loans closed in half the amount of time, on average have their loans clear to close 8 days prior to closing. And I look at your stats, and you're taking 50% longer to close your loans. Your loans are never clear to close before closing, and whatever other stats there are. And then I say, okay, does this processor just hate you, Mr. Loan Officer, and they're not doing your loans, they don't mind getting in trouble on your stuff? Or is it just possible that you and your loans and how you submit those loans are actually a huge part of the problem? And they say, well, she didn't call this person back. I'm like, okay, fine. He didn't call this person back, whatever it is. What are the things that you could be doing differently? And so what we find is the people who are like, hey, when they call up and they go, hey, I'm having trouble with my processor, what do you recommend that I do to fix it? That's somebody I want to spend my life with. Versus, hey, I need a new processor, or this person's not doing their job, or these people don't care. That's somebody that generally either they're going to have to change that mindset to stay in my life, or it's somebody I'm going to distance myself from. And so that mindset of being a player then extends to discipline, right? Because you're like, okay, cool. Is it that I'm overweight because I have bad genes? Or am I overweight because I didn't have the discipline to work out every day, to eat the right foods, to read the information, to learn about the stuff, to read the labels on my thing? And so there's a million areas where you can have an impact. And you may have bad genes. I'm not taking that away from anybody. You may have horrible genes for your weight. But obsessing over that part of it, even talking about that part of it, probably doesn't serve you and isn't going to lead to the results you want. And so we want people who have that player's mindset. Okay, that may be true. Everyone's got some cards stacked against them. What am I going to do to make that change? What am I going to do to fix it?
Yeah. No, that's great, man. Good stuff. So, let's switch over to like things related to our industry and, folks that are listening that are thinking about buying and selling. I'm sure that you get questions on a daily basis. I sure do. Typically, it's going to be, what are the interest rates doing? When are the interest rates going to drop? Is now a good time to buy? And usually that's based on the interest rates. I got a question yesterday from a friend of mine, and it was interesting. And I'm going to go ahead and pass this question along to you. I want to see what your thoughts are. So instead of asking about buying, he wanted to know if him and his wife are thinking about selling their home. And they want to know, they really want to wait until spring for a couple different reasons. But, his question was, is now the best time to sell? Or do you think that spring will be better or different or worse in any way if we waited until then? Do you have any predictions as far as the housing market as it is now as compared to what it may be come spring of 2024?
So I appreciate the question, and I will do my best to answer it. But before I start, I'll just say generally, My answer to this is my crystal ball is broken. And I tell everybody in my life, hey, you want to stay on your toes. So what does that mean? I'm not making predictions about what's going to happen, but I want to be prepared regardless of what happens, right? So if rates continue to go up, my plan and my approach is going to be X. If rates stay the same, my plan and my approach is going to be Y. If rates go down, my plan and my approach is going to be Z, right? And so that's my recommendation, is to not try to make predictions on this stuff. I'll also say this, is that unequivocally, this is a very good time to sell a house, right? You have a situation where we don't have enough inventory. There's still buyers out there, and home prices are at the highest they've ever been, right? So if you're like, hey, I know I'm going to sell, right? Then like, it's probably a pretty good time to sell. Does that mean that home prices will not be higher in the spring? Of course it doesn't, right? But if you're hoping to time the market perfectly, whether you're buying or selling stocks and buying and selling real estate or anything else, if you need to get in and out at the perfect moments, you're probably going to lose more than you're going to win, right? And so what you want to do is set yourself up where you have optionality. And so if it's a situation where it's like, if I sold right now, I'd be okay. I'd love to be better, but things would be pretty good if I sold right now, then put your house on the market. If you know that let's say home prices go down really fast, and they're 6 or 7 or 8% lower in the spring than they are right now, which would be a pretty historic, very quick drop. Are you still going to be okay? Are you going to be ready to jump off a bridge? Well, then you might not want to risk it. If it's just like, hey, I'll have a little less money in my pocket, then okay, maybe there's other factors that go into it. And so I like to really dive into a person's individual situation. Instead of trying to make predictions, what is your risk tolerance and what is the upside and downside in each scenario? And that usually kind of brings some clarity to what that person should do. But I don't know that there's some overall answer to those types of questions. And I certainly have no idea what's going to be happening in the spring. There's a million things I can think of that could go either way, but it's the million that I can't think of that actually are the reason I'm less likely to make a prediction like that.
Yeah. Now that was very safe, and I've used the whole crystal ball, reference myself. It just suits. I've got a magic 8 ball behind me. I can shake that around and try to give you an answer too.
I'll say one last thing I'll say is I don't believe in ever selling real estate if you can avoid it. And what I mean by that is that guy, if I were that guy, I would borrow against that house to buy another house if I want to, whatever I had to do. But I'm keeping my real estate investments for now and for the long term, because every house I've sold, I've regretted selling, and every house I still own, I'm super psyched about. And so if there's a way where you can kind of get to where you want to go without selling your house, I think I'm a buy and hold real estate investor, and I still believe very much in the real estate market long term.
I will pass that information along to him and tell him you said so. It's good stuff, though. It really is. Yeah. So as we start to wrap up today's show, I'd really like to hear a little bit about things that you're doing that maybe are outside of, the mortgage or housing, industry, but still kind of tie in. Tell me a little bit about the podcast that you're getting ready to rejuvenate.
Yeah, so my wife and I, when we first moved to Charleston, we started a podcast called Meeting Charleston because we wanted to meet all the cool people in Charleston. And what better way to meet cool people than to tell them you're going to interview them on a podcast and put them on it. So that was 5 or 6 years ago. We did that right up through the first half of the pandemic. And then we were so crazy with work in a good way. We just kind of, our inspiration for the podcast waned a little bit, that we kind of put on ice and we said we'd circle back to it. Now it's something we're getting back into as we are looking for partners in some other businesses that I think are real estate adjacent here in the Charleston area. As you said from the beginning, my passion is helping other people get to where they want to go. I've done some coaching outside of the mortgage industry, realtors, CEOs and executives in different industries, everything from like clearing firms in New York City to small businesses here in the Charleston area. But what I'd love to do now is find some people in their late 20s, early 30s who have a business, want to take that business to the next level, maybe don't know how to do it, partner with those people to help take those businesses to the next level, and use some of the things that me and my team bring to the table that can kind of accelerate that process. And, I find so often that young people have all the talent to do these things, but they have kind of this imposter syndrome or this, like, they feel fraudulent. They don't know how talented they are, and they're afraid to kind of take that next step. If by partnering with us, we can give them some of the feeling of safety or security or eliminate some of that imposter syndrome that makes them feel like they can go ahead and take that next step, go from being the number 2 guy at this plumbing company to starting their own plumbing company, that kind of a thing. I think that would really energize me in terms of the work that I want to do. And so the podcast is an avenue for us to go ahead and continue to meet those people and get connected with those individuals. And hopefully we find some amazing people that we want to spend our lives with and help get to that next level.
Yeah, I love it, man. That's good stuff. And just to touch on a couple of key points, some takeaways that I think of from our interview, and we didn't get to talk long, but radical transparency. Again, I loved that the term just as soon as I saw it and heard it. And I'm guessing that you're a Zig Ziglar fan with you can get anything in life that you want if you help enough other people get what they want, right?
Sure.
And and then be on the lookout for meeting Charleston. So anything else that's on the horizon for Mark Gordon, personally or professionally?
Yeah, no, I would just like to say that I'm just so proud of what we've done here at Princeton. And I think we're really set up well to be able to navigate the storm that we're in. I'm not trying to sugarcoat this mortgage market for anybody. I've been in it for a long time, and I've never seen rates this high. And certainly them going up this fast has been difficult. But the team here has done an amazing job of navigating that. I'm excited about what we have going on. And I'm really looking forward to pushing through and seeing how we can continue to differentiate ourselves in this business.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, special thanks to the Mortgage Reports for making this episode possible. I want to thank our audience, and wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, if you found today's episode helpful, please rate it and review it. That helps us grow and get more listeners. And if you know someone who could benefit from today's episode, if you could share it, that would be awesome. Mark, if our listeners want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, I'm Mark D. Gordon on Instagram, and you can certainly find me on Facebook or LinkedIn, Mark D. Gordon, but Instagram is probably the easiest place where I come up. And I'm happy to connect with all sorts of different people, and don't be afraid to reach out if you have a question or just want to talk.
That's awesome. Mark Gordon, I so appreciate you coming on the show today. I feel like we learned a lot here, and that was all you, my man. So thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it, Craig. Thanks for having me on.
You got it, man.